The biggest source of memory leaks in Java is when an object requires being closed to release the objects it owns. For example, if you open a file and never close it, even though that object's lifetime ends, the references it has to other objects may not get cleaned up. And if that happens, even garbage collection isn't going to free that memory. Over time, that can make the system run out of memory. So we need to be careful about this. As an example of what we have to worry about, look at this code. It looks like we've been good because we closed the scanner. However, if our user entered something that wasn't an integer, that next int call would throw an input mismatch exception, which would cause this code to stop executing and return back to whoever called us. That means that the keyboard close would never get called. We can use the try-catch-finally structure to clean this up. With this code, when that exception gets thrown, the finally block gets executed before the exception is actually thrown. And if no exception is thrown, then the finally block gets executed when the try block is finished. Good. That means that either way, the scanner gets closed. However, we can do even better than that. Java can help us clean this up if we use the try with resources block. In this, we create the objects that need to be closed at the top of the try block. That tells the compiler that we want those objects to be closed when we leave this block, no matter how we leave it. So, if an exception gets thrown, we can trust that the scanner will be closed before that happens. If no exceptions are thrown, the scanner will be closed when we leave the try block. And these tries are just like regular try-catch blocks. If we want to handle some exceptions, we can include catch blocks, and the compiler will still make sure that, whether we go into a catch or the try executes without throwing anything, the scanner will always be closed. To use an object within a try with resources block, its class has to implement auto-closeable. For example, say I want to create a class that manages an XML file. Yes, these exist, and I would never build one myself, but it's just an example. At construction, it's given a file name, and it opens that file. At some point, we need to make sure that that file gets closed, or we'd have a memory leak. The standard for how we should do that is make the class implement auto-closeable, and that will require it to have a close method. Once we've done that, we can use objects from that class in the try with resources blocks, and we'll make sure that everything gets cleaned up. Often, we need to have multiple closable objects open in one block of code. For example, this code uses a scanner and one of my silly XLS files. We can put the creation of all of the auto-closable objects at the top of the try block, and the system will ensure that they all get closed before this code exits. To prevent locking issues, the system will close the objects in the opposite order when they were created. In this case, it doesn't matter because the scanner and XLS file don't share anything, but the XLS file would be closed before the scanner object. And again, we don't have to have these catch blocks for closable objects to get closed. We could just let those exceptions be thrown to whoever called us. There is one last subtlety to this. We can put objects that are final into the top of the try block, even if they've already been created. In fact, we can do that with any object that is effectively final, meaning that it isn't changed by this code. So we could put the creation of my file outside of the try block too. However, I am not sure why you'd do this. Essentially, you're extending the scope of those variables to include the space before and after the try with resources block. Scope after the block seems really useless because after the block, the object will be closed, which makes it unusable. Scope between the creation and the start of the try block would only be useful if you do operations that can't throw exceptions, which just seems pretty risky to me. What if somebody makes something else in that area throw an exception? Then those objects won't get closed. So I don't think that's a really good idea. I think you should put the creation of the closable objects in the top of the try with resources block. If I'm wrong, please give me a reason why this is valuable in the comments. In order to prevent memory leaks in Java, objects that need to be closed should implement auto-closable. And whenever you use an auto-closable object, you should put it in a try with resources block to make sure that no matter what happens, no matter what exceptions get thrown, you are certain that object will be closed.